Hey everybody, it's the dude here to bring you another video. This week we finally get what the Kingdom storyline was building to since it was first introduced in episode 2. Every scene between any and all of these characters has been leading us right here, truly culminating in the emotional transformation of the Morgan character. It is a big episode to say the least. So let's just dive into my review and analysis of Season 7, Episode 13 of The Walking Dead. Bury Me Here. We open at the Kingdom. Ezekiel's knights appear to be loading up for a shipment for the Saviors. Strangely, what turns out to be one measly cantaloupe. They all look heartbroken. Specifically Morgan, who we see in the back, just staring off into the distance. This was not clear when I first watched it, but this obviously takes place in the future, after the first shipment has gone awry. You can see our dear departed Benjamin's blood stain on the wood of the bed of this truck. This scene was very quick and gave us much more questions than answers. Later this episode becomes somewhat of a mystery, and I think opening like this is appropriate in setting the tone for the episode. We then cut to black. We hear Carol waking up in the middle of the night. She lights a lantern and then sits up to have a cigarette. But that isn't enough to soothe her. She says, "God damn it," and leaves. It becomes clear that Carol doesn't think Daryl was 100% honest with her. She can't sleep because she feels like there are people that she loves that she thinks are alive that aren't. Back at the Kingdom, we find Morgan training Benjamin's younger brother, while Benjamin himself looks on fondly. It's clear Morgan has become very attached to these two. And such a positive second Kingdom scene after the obviously grim opener really spelled doom for this episode. Back with Carol needing to know the truth. She heads out for the Kingdom, killing a few walkers on the way, which impresses Benjamin, who was about to do that for her. She charges past him. She says, "Where's Morgan?" And he says, You okay? Where's Morgan? Oh, that is a double line. For those of you unfamiliar with what a double line is, it is when a character says a line once and then says it again with different inflection for more emphasis. It happens all the time in the show, and since the beginning of the season I've been keeping a tally. Last episode we got over 100, but I won't stop counting until they stop writing them. So that is 1 point for Where's Morgan? In Morgan's room now, Carol enters and immediately says, "Why did Jesus bring Daryl and everyone else to the Kingdom?" And he decides to lie to her, to keep the secret that Daryl kept from her. He straightens up. "They wanted to see if we could start working together on things. Daryl said they beat them back in Alexandria. Is that true? You need to talk to Daryl about that." He says that when she asked him not to tell anybody that she was out there, that he didn't, that Daryl just found her and that what they talked about was between them. But if she really wants to know, he'll take her back to Alexandria right now if she wants. It seems to me like even though Morgan didn't tell Carol, that this answer still tells her that something did happen. Morgan asks her, "You found what you wanted, right? You got away from everyone? Is it what you wanted? Or was it just too late to get away? Hey, we can leave for Alexandria right now. Right now. If you wanna." But she leaves. Carol is stuck in this vicious cycle of not wanting to be a part of a group but still loving this family that she built. Outside, Benjamin asks her to train him, that he saw what he did to those zombies and he just wants to learn. He can skip out on that drop, but she says no. Do your drop. Now, since Benjamin was introduced, I knew that he was going to die in a way to change Morgan. And this being the third episode to feature a Kingdom supply drop, I just knew that it was going to happen this episode. So, when Carol said no, I just felt like right there she was sending Benjamin to his grave. And at this point I was very interested to see how she would take that when he inevitably died. On the way back to her cabin, Carol sees a walker that she had injured but not killed. Yet now it lays there dead. She looks around, confused, but moves on. Just then we see someone creep from behind a building. It's Richard, starting our mystery off for the episode. He heads behind that building, where he appears to be burying this backpack that belonged to his child, Katie. We saw this bag in his secret stash in episode 10. Back with Ezekiel, the king is looking out at his kingdom. In the courtyard, he sees a guitarist going to band practice, a father and their child laughing, and a class learning everything he's built before him. A woman comes out wearing a hijab, apparently the first openly Muslim character in The Walking Dead. Good for you guys. I'm really glad she went to the Kingdom, because otherwise she probably wouldn't have survived. She stops far away from Shiva. Ezekiel turns, "You may approach, Nabila." "I'm fine where I am. We got a little problem that could turn into a big problem inside of a week. Most of the plants down there, they got weevils. We have to cut and burn everything before the weevils get to the main crops in the courtyard. I know the royal garden is important to you, but here's the beautiful thing, your majesty. You can tear it out and cut it down, burn it and throw it all away. But if you want, it can all grow back." Ezekiel smiles, and Shiva lets out a growl. And Nabila says, "Okay, I think I just pissed myself. I'm gonna go." First, gotta love Nabila. The just pissed myself line is a little silly, but you know, that's just Nabila's character. This whole Weevil story is a pretty, no pun intended, cut and dry metaphor. To Ezekiel, these saviors are a little problem that could turn into a big problem inside of a week. The plants in the courtyard represent all the people that Ezekiel cares about, and the plants in the royal garden represents his royal guard. The sorry few knights that must die, so the saviors do not reach the common folk. Ezekiel looks down to the royal garden and sees the red-headed knight loading up some cantaloupe into a wheelbarrow. Inside there are 12. One rolls off the top, leaving 11 in the rows. This could be an interesting bit of visual foreshadowing, knowing what we know now that one of these cantaloupes is removed. At the same time, the royal garden, I believe, is where Ezekiel grows all the crops that he plans to give to the saviors. So if he has to burn it, it looks like he's done giving stuff to them. So there's a lot of layers here. That, along with some clever dialogue delivered by a new fun character, makes for a great scene. Back in Morgan's room, Benjamin comes in, telling him that they are going to leave in 5 minutes. He hands him back his book, the book that Morgan got from Eastman. He recites from it, "To injure an opponent is to injure oneself. You get injured no matter what." He then gives Morgan a painting that he says he found in a restaurant while out scavenging. "I know a girl, she helped me fix it up." He says, "So who's the girl?" He gets all awkward, like, we're at like 3 minutes ago right now, so he walks out. Outside, where they're loading up the cantaloupes, Richard and Morgan are looking at Benjamin as he says goodbye to his younger brother. Richard said, "Kid's too young to be a father." He then goes into this long little spiel about how before the apocalypse he had a perfect life with a perfect wife and a perfect child at the perfect time. And he turns to Morgan, "How about you?" And he just goes... Lenny James, who plays Morgan, says so much in that one little nod. The fact that he did have that perfect life. This really makes it clear that he's holding back so much, that he's not thinking about the things that at one point was all that mattered to him. After the third cobbler joke of the season, they all pack into the back of the truck, and one more time Morgan says, "Who's the girl?" That's a double line. Remember right before Noah died in season 5, they were all loading up to go on a run. Everybody was chit-chatting and laughing, saying their unfortunate final goodbyes. And Tara says to Noah, "Hey, I heard you talking to Holly last night. What's her story?" He's like, "Ah." And then later, back in the truck, she brings it up again. Here, the exact same thing is happening. They are setting up a false future for Benjamin, in which maybe he has a girlfriend. Just like they were doing for Noah. I know I'm a major nerd and have seen this show a lot, but that was the first thing that came to mind when I saw this scene. So maybe they shouldn't have used the exact same device to make us think that Benjamin wasn't going to die. And this is really what I've been worried about this whole season. I didn't want Benjamin to be a Noah. Someone who is written up so the audience loves them just to kill them. It's not lazy or wrong per se, it just makes me less likely to get attached to any new characters they send my way, because I'm just looking for the little bits of dialogue that hint to their total inevitable death. Later out in the world, this truck is stopped by a roadblock made up of a series of shopping carts, set up like an arrow. Richard says he'll cover everybody as they go check it out. This is obviously where he goes to the back of the truck, gets a cantaloupe, and puts it under the yellow plastic tub. The team follows the shopping carts to behind the building, where they find an empty grave and a pile of dirt next to it, a sign saying, "Bury me here." Ezekiel believes this to be a person just lost in the apocalypse, without hope. He goes on this monologue about being driven mad by this world. Behind him we see Richard's reaction. He obviously set all this up and is looking at his intended grave. The look on his face doesn't really feel appropriate. Obviously at this point they don't want the audience to get suspicious of Richard, but his reaction just seems too mournful, and genuine at that. I think Richard the actor is good and is pretending a little too well not to be knowing what's going on. I feel like if we had gotten him shifting his eyes just a little bit, it would be both unnoticeable on the first watch and more appropriate on the rewatch. At the drop point for the first time, these saviors are the first ones there. Jared, the douchey one with the long hair, is swinging Morgan's stick back and forth. Gavin says, "You're late. You could indulge us your pardon. Our path..." I don't want to hear about it. Don't interrupt the king. Gavin shoots Jared a look, and he smacks him in the face with Morgan's staff. And Benjamin says, "Rat-faced prick." Jared stands up and looks at him. In this moment, I think Jared made the decision that if something was to go wrong, even though off-screen Gavin, I'm sure, reiterated that Richard would be the one to go, Jared's got his own plans. Don't bring that your highness shit our way. He walks up to inspect the offering. He takes a look, sees that it's short, and says, "Gonna need your guns too," and everybody pulls the guns on each other. Ezekiel's like, "We did not agree to that." I think it's important to note that at this time, Morgan is the only one who doesn't have his finger on the trigger. He does not want this. "We should give them over, Your Majesty." And Jared says, "Yeah, we should give them over, Your Majesty." Double up. You can give them up, or you can use them. Same choice you've always had, I guess. So what's it gonna be? Ezekiel, you know the choice. What's it gonna be? Ding. "You're short." We said 12, I count 11. Ezekiel walks over and counts them himself. "This is impossible." "It's possible. It's happening now. Right now is the only time that matters. So we're gonna deal with all of this right now." And Jared's like, "Right now is in right now." And he's like, "Right now." Double line. And Jared whips the gun on Richard, and Richard steps up to it, accepting this, wanting this for the kingdom. And Jared's like, "Ugh," and moves the gun and shoots behind him. And we hear, "No!" Ugh! Even in the middle of an episode, I hate a cliffhanger. When we come back, we see that Benjamin has been shot in the leg. And what did I say? Richard was gonna do this, and Gavin would punish Richard by killing Benjamin. I said it. Gavin turns around to find his plan all fucked up. Gavin seems like he doesn't really subscribe to the whole savior's mindset. He is in this position of power placed there by Negan, but he's given Ezekiel a lot of chances. And sure, he gave Jared the okay to shoot Richard, but he's not happy about it in the slightest. I think it would be interesting if down the line, if any of the saviors like Negan's wives or some other lowly serfs wanted to go against Negan, if Gavin would join them. Very frustrated, Gavin says that he wants that one cantaloupe here tomorrow. I have a question. How is even 12 cantaloupes enough? The first time they brought them pigs, like 6 of them. Then they brought them a bunch of gas and watermelons, and now it's just a couple of cantaloupes? I feel like even if they had the full 12, that shouldn't really be enough. It wasn't last week with the watermelons produce week? Benjamin appears to be bleeding out. Morgan says they need to get him to Carol's because they left her with a bunch of medical supplies. When they all get on the truck, Richard is standing there awestruck, not moving. Morgan tells him to get in the car, but he still doesn't after a moment. I mean, I know that he's feeling hugely guilty that his plan went wrong, but standing there in shock does so much worse for Benjamin when every moment his life is in the balance. At Carol's, we see her planting some seeds. For future reference, anytime anyone is planting seeds, they are thinking about a future. They are growing. They plan to stay where they are for a long time. And anytime anyone has ever been planting seeds in this show, that future has been brutally cut short. Remember when right before the prison fell, Rick and Carl were planting crops? Before Alexandria was swarmed by zombies and Deanna died, she was planning to build up Alexandria, including a whole section for crops. And now here, Carol is planning to stay here alone for the rest of her life, and of course, that's not what's gonna happen. Inside, they are trying to save Benjamin's life. They give us this one shot that clearly shows us that the main artery in his leg has been hit. He is a lost cause. He grabs Morgan's hand and says, "It's okay. To injure an opponent is to injure yourself." And the next thing you know, he's dead. He's got a sheet over him and Morgan has just stabbed him in the head, making sure he doesn't turn. Whew. It's a rough scene, and even though it's something that I predicted, I definitely care for the surviving characters that are having to deal with this. I think Ezekiel gives a great performance. Richard is tormented by what he's done. Carol plays conflicted very well because she has given Benjamin no attention, and Morgan is clearly changed. He leaves in a fury. That last line that Benjamin says, "To injure an enemy is to injure oneself," I really fixate on that, and it makes me wonder why Morgan does what he does in the end of this episode. And I'll get back to that when the time comes. Morgan goes back to the shopping cart roadblock. He's breathing heavily. Just the sound of his breath sounds more like Morgan did in season 3 when Rick saw him, when he had lost his mind. It cuts in between the past and the present, showing us everything Morgan has been through. His son, his wife, losing his mind, meeting Rick, keeping people away with the signs. In his fury, he kicks over this yellow plastic tub, and under it he discovers the missing cantaloupe. Chronologically, I think then Morgan goes over to the grave with the sign saying, "Bury me here." He sits in the grave and takes out his knife and tries to slit his own wrist, but he can't. I think Morgan feels guilty. I think Morgan thinks he should have cleared this situation, just like he was doing so long ago. He feels like he lost his family because he wasn't thinking, and now he's lost in some way a replacement son because he feels again like he wasn't taking action. But that's not him anymore. He goes to Richard's room and throws the yellow tub on the ground, and he says, It was supposed to be me. We see Morgan. His eyes are sunken in his skull. He looks just like he did before he met Eastman, an animal fueled by rage. And then Richard stands up. He doesn't blame himself, really. He says that he was trying to do something because the royal we were not trying to do anything. He then goes into his origin story, a very long tale of him with his wife and daughter in a camp. A fight started, followed by a fire that led to his wife's death. Then, after days of being alone with his daughter, he saw her die right in front of him. Of course, this is the same story that Morgan has gone through. Made worse, of course, by the fact that Morgan was unable to kill his zombified wife, which only resulted in her eventually killing his son. Nevertheless, both of their stories represent that neither of them did something. They let things be, and by the time things went wrong, they felt like it was all their fault. At first, I thought what Benjamin said to Morgan, to injure an enemy is to injure oneself, I thought that would further ingrain him into the we don't kill kind of stance he's been in. But remember back to when Benjamin first said this line earlier in the episode, he followed it by saying, you get injured either way. And although that aspect wasn't repeated by Benjamin on his deathbed, I think that was the aspect that stuck with Morgan. That either way, the not killing, not acting, is what really hurts you in the end. I don't think Morgan is open with killing just anyone, but he is definitely no longer going to keep his finger off the trigger. Richard tells them that they have to use what happened, but that they still have to do something to earn their trust back, so that they can eventually turn on them, along with the hilltop in Alexandria. Morgan simply listens to this, taking it all in. The audience is not meant to know what he thinks about this. I think that Morgan agrees with him, has had this realization, and thinks that he is right about acting and the need to act, but that he did it all wrong. Richard was trying to indirectly do so much. To Morgan, that's not the way to do it either. In his room at night, we see Morgan thinking it all over. We see him look on as Ezekiel comforts Benjamin's younger brother. Morgan is filled with so much anger and regret, but he knows what he needs to do. Back at the drop zone, the Kingdomites have arrived early, where we see the blood mark left by Benjamin, along with both his and Morgan's staff. I didn't notice earlier that they had left them here. I think that shows us that Benjamin has grown to mean more to Morgan than even Eastman did. Morgan asks Richard, did you tell him? Wanting to know if he told Ezekiel what he had done. Did you? Not now. We'll talk about it when we get back. I think right there that Morgan feels that Richard has no intention of telling Ezekiel. That he's just going to ride this out, use Benjamin's death for his own good, so he can be the leader of this army. Morgan sees greed and selfishness in Richard, things that Morgan feels have no place in this world. Gavin asks about Benjamin, but can tell just by a glance that he's dead. There seems to be a substantial amount of remorse on Gavin's face. He turns to Jared and tells him to walk home, although I'm sure they would pick him up on their way back. Richard walks up to Gavin and the Saviors and starts his little spiel. Listen, we understand. And Morgan drops Benjamin's stick and with his own smacks Richard twice across the face. He then gets on top of him and starts strangling him. Gavin, who's standing right over them, tells him, leave him be. Ezekiel, horrified, shouting, Morgan, stop! Morgan! Fuck. This caught me so off guard. It makes much more sense now, but the first time I saw this I was like, what the fuck? Even after Benjamin's death, I had thought that what Benjamin had said on his deathbed was pushing Morgan in the opposite direction. But no, Morgan seems to be using this, letting out his frustration, killing Richard, and using that to make them understand. He leans up, out of breath. Amazing performance. He set it all up. He blocked the road yesterday and made us late. And we had your offering when we left. He took one from the cargo and he hid it. He wanted to get something started between the kingdom and the Saviors. He looks at Gavin. Hey. And then stands up. Hey. I wanted to show you that we get it. That we understand what we need to do. That we know how to go on. I think what he's really talking about is that he knows what he needs to do to go on, and that is, unfortunately, tragically, to kill. When Gavin leaves, Ezekiel points at Richard and says, he did this. Well, thought he could choose, and that's why Dwayne had to die. And Ezekiel, Dwayne. Morgan looks at Ezekiel like he hasn't heard that name said by anyone other than himself in so long, but then stops himself from crying. It's a profoundly incredible reaction that has so much history to it. He corrects himself. Benjamin. That's why Benjamin had to die. Morgan, let us take our leave. And he says, I was supposed to. Even now, he's referring back to that he was supposed to kill his wife. Supposed to put her down when she was a walker. If that hadn't happened, possibly Dwayne would be alive. His life would be different. He was supposed to. And he never wants to feel like he was supposed to again. That's why he's killing again. And I think that is totally justifiable. And at first I was not excited that Morgan was just reverting, but I think he is growing, because his understanding of what he needs to do is different. And this, mistaking Benjamin verbally for Dwayne, is such a powerful moment. I love it. Morgan says, not now. He protests and he says, man, I said not now. They leave and he stabs Richard through the head. The second person he's done that to in 2 days. On the way back to the grave, we see Morgan dragging Richard's body. When he gets there and starts to bury him, he finds the backpack that belonged to his daughter. In the comics, Morgan didn't have a wife, or at least not one that we met. However, Dwayne, his son, did turn into a zombie. When Rick goes back and finds him again, he's kept his zombie son alive for so long. Rick tells him that he has to put him down, and Morgan says he will. But after they leave, we see that he's left his son there. That's not what happened in the show, but it does make me feel like, in a way, burying Katie's backpack is like saying goodbye to his son. He then goes on a badass zombie killing spree before knocking on Carol's door. Do you really want to know what happened in Alexandria? What happened to you? And pretty coldly, he says, killed Richard. He's the one who got Benjamin killed, so... Carol looks at him like he's lost it, and he is saying it a little too cut and dry. He asks again, do you want to know what happened in Alexandria? Double I. And she does. She knows there's something more. She has to. Negan killed Glenn and Abraham. Melissa McBride is fantastic. She reacts just as she should, and Carol knows that Daryl lied to her. You wanted to know. Now you do. And he turns away. She says, where are you going? He says, I'm gonna kill him. Out there, one by one. But where? Somewhere else. Wait. You can go and not go. And he looks at the cabin, understanding that she means for him to stay here. Cool off a little bit. She can go. This is exactly what Ezekiel said in episode 2 to her, in order to convince her to stay in this cabin. You can go and not go. Ezekiel said it twice last time, making it a double line then, and just because I'm greedy, I'll make it a triple line. He turns away, but she says, please. And then Carol, alone, goes back to the kingdom to find Ezekiel and Benjamin's younger brother, who I still haven't caught his name, replanting the royal garden, it having been burned clear of weevils. Like I said earlier, this means that Ezekiel is done giving things to the saviors, at least things that can be grown. Carol says that she's staying here now, and that they have to fight, and Ezekiel says, we do. And together the three of them start planting anew. Ironically, this little boy is played by the real-life brother of the actress who played Sophia, Carol's daughter. He must have been much younger when she was on the show, but it's so cool to have him in the show now. I'd be interested to see how Melissa McBride actually feels about working with this kid. Together, her and Ezekiel could form some kind of family, and it could be what Carol always wanted. Or maybe that'll just make her run away again. Back at Carol's, now Morgan's cabin, he's sitting on the front porch, and all we can hear is the scraping of wood. He's making his staff into a spear. It is the physical and symbolic representation that Morgan is a changed man. He is on the warpath, ready to kill. It is a powerful, powerful image. I love it so much. And that is a wrap for the episode. I felt like this season the Kingdom story did dawdle a little bit, but it paid off in a major way. I was sad to see Benjamin go in such a predictable way, but boy did I not see Morgan killing Richard. I thought the way his breakdown was handled was fantastic, and for Carol to be brought into the fold by a changed Morgan, working with Ezekiel now, I'm super excited. I thought this was one of the best episodes of this season with the most change and growth. Next episode it looks to be all at the hilltop, with Simon coming looking for Daryl. Hopefully, dude double line, we finally see Maggie and Daryl have a conversation about Glenn, finally getting some resolution whether or not she blames him for Glenn's death. It's something I desperately want from both of those characters, and I am excited to see it. Let me know what you thought of the episode and my review down in the comments section. Please remember to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and watch it again. This has been The Dude. See ya.